back to Knitting 101. I hope you've been having lots of fun practicing casting on, which we learned in the last lesson. Today you're going to be learning your first actual stitch, the knit stitch. The knit stitch is the basis for all knitting projects. You cannot do any kind of knitting without knowing how to do it. You could, if you wanted, exclusively learn the knit stitch and use it for all your projects. I don't recommend it. But it is the basis of anything that you are going to be knitting. Now, if you were to cast on some number of stitches and work every row with the knit stitch, then you would create this fabric. This is called Garter Stitch, and you can see that it creates a series of these ridges. So as I said, you could only learn the knit stitch and have all of your projects be in Garter Stitch fabric. Probably you don't want to though, but it is a key thing to learn in order to keep moving forward. So in order to start today's lesson, go ahead and cast 16 stitches onto one of your knitting needles, and then we'll be ready to get started. Okay, now we are ready to learn to do the knit stitch. So you have your needles with your 16 stitches cast on. Now after you've worked your cast on, you're going to take the ball of yarn and move it over to the other side. So now you have your needle with your stitches, and you want the working yarn now over on the right side by your right hand. And this tail end is going to be here on your left side. You won't have to worry about this. Just move it out of the way and make sure you don't accidentally knit with it. Okay, so working yarn is over on the right hand side now, and you're going to turn your needle so that both of these yarns are sort of facing up, as it were. And the most recent stitch that you cast on, the last stitch, is at the top of the needle here. Here's where you started. All right, so you're going to hold the needle with the stitches in your left hand. Again, it'll take practice for you to get comfortable with holding the needle, and there's no right or wrong. Eventually you'll figure out how it is that's most comfortable for you. You're going to hold the working needle, that is the one that is currently empty, in your right hand. So to get started, you don't want this tail end of the yarn in your way, so you might kind of grab that with your left hand and just hold it out of the way for now. The key is that you don't want to accidentally knit with it. So you are going to, again, tension your working yarn by using 2 fingers or 1 finger, however you like, to hold it against your palm. The yarn is going to go over your index finger. It's called the working yarn. And then you're going to pick up your knitting needle. So the knit stitch, take your knitting needle, insert it into the first stitch on the left needle from below to the back. Then you're going to use your thumb on the top and your remaining fingers on the bottom to support the weight of that needle, and hold them both while you use your right hand to wrap the working yarn around that needle that was in your right hand. Then you're going to pull the yarn through, and then you slide that first stitch off the needle. All right, so you've knit 1 stitch. And then you're going to keep repeating that process for every stitch on the needle, and that is called 1 row. So again, you're going to insert your right hand needle into the next stitch from below. So it's going to kind of pop out the back. You're going to let go of that needle and use your right hand to wrap the working yarn around the right needle and pull it through. And then you're going to slip this stitch off the left needle. Insert the needle from below wrap your working yarn around your needle, pull it through, and slide that stitch off the needle. So each time you knit a stitch, you're sliding one stitch off this needle and creating the new stitch on your right hand needle. And we're going to do this all the way across the row. Insert from below, wrap the working yarn around, pull through, and slide that stitch off the left needle. Now I'm going to work the rest of the stitches in this row a little more quickly because I want to show you what to do when you get to the end of the row. Okay, we've got all the way to the last stitch. We worked all the way to the end of the row, so you can see this used to be, the tail end used to be the top of the left needle, now it's down here at the bottom. All right, so now we have all of these new stitches on our right hand needle, and the left needle that had all this cast on stitches is empty. Now what do? Turn your needle over so that the tail end of the yarn is down here out of the way. Your working yarn is still at the top, and now you're holding what was your right needle in your left hand, and you're going to take the empty needle and hold that in your right hand and just keep practicing. So insert the needle into the first stitch, grab that working yarn, wrap it around, pull through, and slide off. Into the first stitch, wrap the yarn around, pull through, and slide off. As I said originally, if you continue to work the knit stitch for all the stitches back and forth for every row, you will create something in a fabric called Garter Stitch, which has little ridges of a bunch of bumps all in a row. And I'll show you when I'm finished this row. Okay, back to the end. Okay, you can see now that I have a row of those bumps, just like the fabric I showed you at the beginning. So now again, all of my stitches have moved to the right hand needle. My left hand needle is now empty. Again, I'm just going to turn it over, pass the needle with all the stitches to my left hand. You can see now this tail end of the yarn is up at the top again, so we might want to hold that out of the way. And now we switch the empty needle to the right hand, and we can keep going in Garter Stitch, knitting each stitch for as long as we like. You can make a whole scarf this way if you wanted, washcloth, basically anything that is square or rectangular, which, let's face it, is not that many things. But that is all there is to it. And now again, I'm going to do the demonstration as I did yesterday without any narration to make sure it is clear for you guys and you can really focus. So I'm going to work to the end of the row so that we're starting at the beginning with the left needle full of stitches. And that's all there is to working the knit stitch. All right, so there you have it, the knit stitch, the most basic stitch in knitting, the one you absolutely need to know to do any kind of project. As I said, you could exclusively use the knit stitch and make garter stitch fabric for everything that you work on, but probably you're not going to want to do that. So in the next lesson, we are going to be learning the purl stitch, which is the other basic stitch in knitting. Once you know how to do knits and purls, you'll be able to make just about any kind of project that you want, and it won't all be in that garter stitch fabric. So I will see you for lesson 3 tomorrow.